Wolfgang Aschauer. I'd like to introduce him to you. He is an assistant professor at the Department of Sociology in Salzburg. And he is working on 3 research fields. He wrote many PhD. He wrote his PhD 5 years ago on the influence of terrorist attacks on tourism, a comparative study on Bali, Sinai, and Spain, and he published a book, Tourism in the Shadow of Terrorism. Now he works mainly in the field of quantitative methodology, and he tries to develop new indicators of societal progress for the European Union. He focuses on the contemporary challenges of social integration in terms of crisis and negative side effects, such as xenophobia. His main scientific effort is to shed light on the perspective of European citizens using comparative survey data. Okay, please.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. I also want to say that I really appreciate it to be here and to enjoy all this hospitality from the IFS organization and from the Istanbul Science Foundation. It's also really very interesting. It's not only a conference on the challenges of multiculturalism. The group is really multicultural, even global itself, and it's a very interesting thing to share all these different perspectives from the regions of the world. I want to address the European perspective, as was already said in the introduction, and I want to focus on this new phenomenon of malaise in Europe due to crisis, and more on the subjective crisis feelings, disintegration feelings of European citizens, which can also be a driving force of ethnocentrism. I want to start my presentation with a quote of the famous Polish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. He writes in his book Fluid Times that fear is there, saturating daily human existence as deregulation reaches deep into its foundations and the defensive bastions of civil society fall apart. And that's, in my view, a very clear quote which states that disintegration rises through fear and deregulation on the one hand, and there is this threat of an erosion of solidarity. And in my work, I try to conceptualize and measure these widespread fears in the European Union with the central construct malaise. And malaise represents, in my view, a multidimensional approach to evaluate and measure these new cleavages in social embeddedness, social recognition, trust, and belonging. If we put it simple, we can say a little bit catchy that the European Union is infected with a virus of unleashed neoliberal globalization, dominance of the financial markets, and social disintegration seems to be a subtle but proceeding disease. And this is exactly the medical meaning of the word malaise, and it is also more and more used in a societal sense, representing a dissatisfying situation in society, a kind of misery state. So addressing this topic of social disintegration, malaise leads to a broad range of research questions. We can, for instance, ask, do we really have this new kind of disease in European societies? What are the reasons for that? In which countries do we find clear signs of social disintegration? And what are potential outcomes and future challenges for the European Union and Europe in general? And in the next 15 minutes, I want to address at least some of these questions in my presentation. First, to deeper conceptualization of social disintegration. I mainly refer here to the Bielefeld research group in Germany, led by Wilhelm Heidtmeier. He defines, for instance, 3 crisis states for European societies. The first crisis state is a crisis of social structure, which is represented in an increase in social inequality. The second crisis stage is a crisis of regulation, which manifests itself in a lacking coherence of values and norms. I think it's quite interesting that also in states where material inequalities are very much compensated by the welfare states, like in Scandinavia, the attitudinal differences really grow, and you have this kind of value crisis and polarization of society also in many European states. The last level refers to the crisis of cohesion, which means that in times where flexible orientations are claimed, relationships can get fragile and lead to a loss of solidarity between individuals. In my view, we can also speak of 3 dimensions of vulnerabilities. The first one is economic vulnerability, which leads to a set of exclusion problems. Yeah? When we think of the dramatically high unemployment rates of the youth in Spain, in Portugal, in Greece, in Spain and in Greece it exceeds even 50%, we can speak of a lost generation, for instance. Then we have a kind of lack of legitimacy of politics. This is reflected in very low participation rates when it comes to EU elections, for instance. We have sometimes voter turnout of only 30% of the population. The legitimacy of the EU politics is questioned more and more in several states. And then we have cultural vulnerabilities, which lead to a set of cohesion problems. And here particularly the issue of immigrants, it's very heavily discussed in many societies, and it seems to be one of the major sources of dissent, especially in many Western European countries. After this elaboration of the crucial terms, I want to give a summary of my theoretical approach, and I want to systematize my ideas a little bit more. The model looks quite complex, but I think it's, I hope it's quite easy to explain. It's important to differ between different levels. On the one hand, we should look at the macro level, more the institutional sphere, the system side, and here we can observe rapid transformations in Europe, and we can always observe gaps between the system side, the institutional side, and the social side, because at the system level we can see that the EU integration process still goes further. It's very much promoted by the political institutions, but on the social side we can see that people rely more and more on their national identities, and there are kind of resistance movements. Concerning inequalities, the neoliberal globalization is still more or less the capitalist ideology of progress, but on the other hand we face more and more regional disparities and social inequalities. Also in the winner states of the European Union you have deeper inequalities within the states. And when it comes to insecurities, also quite interesting, on the system level, on the macro level, we have all these transnational risk communities with regard to climate change, to the financial crisis, to the threat of terrorism. But these threats transgress all the borders, cannot be related to the individuals, to specific nations, and produce more or less this global culture of fear. Another important thing is to introduce also a meso level, because of course we have in the nation states different socioeconomic conditions, welfare state arrangements and political actions, and they function as a kind of interface here. They can increase or decrease these certain crisis states in society. And looking at the micro level, we should differentiate between objective crisis states reflected in a lack of resources, for instance, and this subjective crisis feelings. And this crisis feelings I want to address then mainly empirically with my cross-national analysis. A structural crisis state can be reflected in fears of social decline, perceptions of negative working conditions, for instance. A regulative crisis states can be reflected in a high level of political distrust and dissatisfaction with society, and a cohesive crisis state can be reflected in social distrust. It can also insecurity feelings regarding criminality and so on can be used. Okay, so now to my empirical data. I try to provide statistical facts of my thinking, and I use the European Social Survey. That's a major cross-national survey tool all over Europe. It represents high quality, large representative samples, high target response rates, and so on. It's a biannual survey starting from the year 2002. Now the sixth wave of the survey is running. There are three main research questions I want to address. The first one is it possible to develop a cross-culturally valid measurement of disintegration feelings based on European survey data? It's always a necessary first step to achieve equivalence. Yeah? When you conduct empirical analysis cross-nationally, the concepts you define should be equivalent in all different cultures and countries. And this step is often neglected in cross-national research, but it's very important, and I try to confirm this equivalence in the first step. The second research question, is there an increase of disintegration feelings based on this new measurement over the last years in Europe? Which differences occur between European countries? I did a mean comparison over different time points here. And the last research question addresses ethnocentrism, xenophobia as a kind of dependent variable, and I want to ask which predictors of disintegration processes and disintegration feelings are able to explain these new tendencies in European societies. So now to the operationalization of malaise. I included in this table all the different indicators I used to build my and operationalize my construct. And it's important that this malaise is seen as a second order factor. There are these several factors on the first level in line with the theoretical concept of Heitmeyer. You can measure, for instance, structural crisis states with verb-related feelings. Unfortunately, that's not a very sophisticated measurement here because the European Social Survey provides no comprehensive indicators on that. But regarding regulative crisis states, you can use classical indicators to measure political trust, trust in parliament, trust in politicians, and trust in political parties. Then to analyze satisfaction with societal development, there are also three useful items in the European Social Survey. Personal trust is measured with these three classical items on an 11-point scale. You can't be too careful versus most people can be trusted, and so on. And then I included also safety feelings regarding criminality. Here it's a 4-point scale and two indicators of general well-being, the happiness and life satisfaction, also very often used in different survey instruments. The first step of my analysis is now equivalence testing. Maybe because I have only 3 minutes left, I skipped this part. Mainly it's just to the method itself. You can see here the factor loadings, and they should be above 0.5. That means that the items should correlate with the factors, but the factors on the first order are sometimes only contributing not too much to malaise. That's a little bit the problem of this model here. On the other hand, concerning equivalence, you can see that metric invariance is achieved. That's the main result of this table. Unfortunately, I have no time to explain it more in detail. Metric invariance means that the model, the factorial structure seem to be equivalent across all European countries, but scalar invariance is not achieved, which means that you shouldn't really compare the means. There are some items which can be problematic. So now to my country analysis, comparing the means, it should be seen only as an estimation, but it's quite interesting here to look at these rankings because we have no problem of social disintegration and malaise in Scandinavian states and in Switzerland and in the Netherlands. They still perform very well, achieving a high social integration in society. The major European states like Germany, Great Britain, Spain are slightly above the EU average with some signs of disintegration, and Southern Europe and Eastern Europe is confronted with disintegration. But on the other hand, it's a very heterogeneous picture. It seems that Estonia, Czech Republic or Poland seem to converge with Western Europe maybe in the near future, but you have really this high amount of malaise in Romania, in Hungary, in the Ukraine, in Bulgaria, also in Greece, Portugal, for instance. It's also very interesting to look to that phenomenon on a timely perspective, because you can use these indicators from 2004 on, the different waves of the European Social Survey. And here you see that there is no crisis emerging in Switzerland or in the Netherlands, for instance. You have a slight downward trend in France, a slight upward trend in Germany, and very interesting is this sharp decrease in Ireland, because the economical crisis affected Ireland very early, and you see even in the data of 2008 this huge effect on disintegration here. When it comes to Southern Europe, the picture is completely different. Nearly all countries rank below 5, which means a high level of malaise, and you can see this clear decrease in social integration in Spain and in Portugal over the years. Unfortunately, we have only one measurement for Italy and for Greece, but it's also clearly below this scale middle point of 5. Unfortunately, I think I have no time to refer in detail to this regression analysis. I provided a short summary of the results. Maybe we can address it then in the discussion. The results of the regression analysis are also quite interesting, because objective indicators like class, income or social inclusion contribute only very little to this explanation of ethnocentrism. Maybe a few sentences why to use ethnocentrism. For me, that's a very important consequence of this malaise, because the people, especially lower educated, are looking for simple solutions in this very complex transformation situation, and they refer to their national identity very strongly. They try to upgrade their own culture more and more, and they try to define certain scapegoats of this crisis, which leads to end solidarization processes. So objective indicators don't play a major role, with one exception, that's education, which is very important. But these indicators of subjective disintegration feelings seem to be far more relevant, and particularly personal trust, satisfaction with society, and insecurity feelings contribute to the explanation of ethnocentrism here. Another important difference, the effects of education and malaise are particularly high in Western Europe and Scandinavia, but they play no major role in Eastern European states. They cannot explain ethnocentrism, which is equally strong in Eastern Europe. There are huge differences in explanation sizes. And in Southern Europe, we can observe high cross-country differences. Okay, I come to the final conclusion. I think I tried to test and evaluate that it's possible to construct a cross-culturally valid measurement of societal well-being, at least in Europe. And I think that's a major topic also concerning the conference, maybe to shift the focus from economic progress more to quality of life. That's also what Murat said yesterday. Try to find empirical measures, multidimensional measures of quality of life and societal well-being. Yeah. The temporal analysis shows that there is no unidirectional track towards crisis in Europe. That's also very important. There are these major differences between European countries. We have kind of winner states and loser states, and that's very problematic for Europe. This north-south difference is growing. And on the macro level, economical crisis states are mainly responsible. We saw that in the sharp decrease of Ireland, and that's very important because if the economical effects and the crisis states grow in Southern Europe, there is really a danger of maybe even social upheavals because of this disintegration feelings of the citizens. Okay, so thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Your presentation from a viewpoint of European society focusing on ethnocentrism is very instructive.